if that works. Anybody have any questions? Well, thank you all for coming. Old friends and some new ones I see. My preamble will just be to skip a slide that's coming up here that kind of reinforces I'm not on the board of the museum or the Historical Society, but some of my friends are, and they've been very good to me. I live here in Custer for over 25 years. And if you're interested at all in what I present or what you've heard already today, think about becoming a member and certainly joining the society. I think a lifetime membership is $25.
75.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's outrageously priced at $75 for a lifetime. So you could do that, but also it really is fun working at the museum. My wife Camilla and I have done that, and you go down in the basement and you're in a box, and you might be the first person that's opened that in a long time, and they're cataloging this stuff now and getting it scanned online, or so that it can maybe go online eventually. It really is fascinating. Even if you just have a passing interest in history or whatever, you never know what you're going to find. So I certainly encourage you to to consider that. If you're newly moved to Custer recently, looking for something to do, or you've been here all your life looking for something to do, or just want to give a few hours a summer to help with other visitors that come to the museum. So I just want to throw that commercial out there. Well, I'll move real slowly, but I do want to start because I'm afraid I might push up against an hour of talking, unbelievably. And if any of you need to get up and go before that, I will not be offended at all, because this is sort of advertised as a 45-minute program. This is not a program that I've rehearsed repeatedly because it's new material. You'll see a few familiar slides if you saw me speak in the last year or two, especially at the beginning. But then I've got a lot of new stuff that I'm just having fun with, that I'd like to share, that I think has to do with our local history here, that I hope you'll enjoy. And my long-winded title there, I do intend to talk a little bit about Custer City, Sylvan Lake, and the former Harney Peak, or Black Elk Peak as it's officially named now. But I'm going to touch on a project that I'm hopefully bringing to publication in about a year as well at the end of this. So yeah, there was my plug about being a member of the Historical Society. So as Finney alluded to, I, for better or worse, have come up with this reputation for finding the sites of old photographs and then trying to match them precisely with a new picture. And that has become the basis of a number of books that my wife Camille and I have published over the last 20 years, starting with the one on the left and moving kind of to the right there. We always want to thank our readers. If you're not familiar with that, we're independent. We publish these are entirely funded by our own efforts and the help we get from our friends and neighbors and our readers. So every purchase we make means a lot, and really appreciate all of you who come up to me and say, I think I've got every one of your books. You are making my next project possible, and I'll be talking about that project at the end of this program, a book about the entire state of South Dakota that I'm hoping to complete by next year. This is my lovely partner and wife, Camille Reiner, who does all the graphic design on our books, and we're often complimented on those, and I would very proudly hold these up against anything else that's out there in terms of quality, color reproduction, and so on. We really try to do a top-notch job. I am going to just touch on this a little bit. This book, which has been out for 25 years now, but we updated it about 2 years ago. In 2023, we issued a completely new edition of Exploring with Custer. It has a big number 4 on the cover, the 4th revised edition. And if you haven't heard about it, and I know there are people who've heard about it 25 times and are sick of that, and then there's always people who come in who don't have any idea what we've been working on. So this book talks about Custer's expedition when it was in the Black Hills in 1874. And the updates from the previous edition include every page being updated in some way. We added 36 new pages of material, things that have been discovered over the last 20 years. I went back to every single photo site where the photographer took a picture in 1874 and took a new picture in 2020 or 2022. And that was 20 years after I'd done it the first time for our original edition. So it really is like a new book. The quality of the photos is much better, and I was able to take those on the same day as the photographer did back in 1874, which gives it another dimension of lighting, the shadows and so on. You can even see what time of day he was there on that location sometimes. We got scans of the original glass negatives, which are awesome. They're from the State Archives in Pierre. The detail and clarity and depth to these is unbelievable. In the past, we were using copy prints, which had very high contrast, and you lose a lot of information. You'll see that in a couple of photos. We've colorized some of those pictures as well. And then we updated all the GPS data because technology has improved a lot in the last 20 years, right? So, and this book in a nutshell lets you navigate along their whole route through the Black Hills, you know, including right here to Custer, if you'd like. So this is just the whole route of the expedition. That's Bismarck, North Dakota, way up there. Fort Lincoln is where they came from, down to the Black Hills. So that book focuses on, oh, I beg your pardon, I'm gonna back up here. The book with a 4 on the cover focuses on the Black Hills part of their trip. Crossing the Plains with Custer is about their time on the plains as they came to and left the Black Hills. So these two books go together to kind of tell that whole story. My co-authors also deserve a lot of credit on this. John Nelson from Rapid City, Ernie Graffey from the Black Hills, and now from the far west of California. Both did easily a third of the work in those books. I just want to point that out. We didn't do this all by ourselves. So take a look at those over on the table. If you're not familiar, you haven't seen the updated edition. So just a reminder, this is what came down the hill right behind us here on July 30th, 1874. 110 wagons, 1,000 people, 1,500 horses and mules. We think they came across the Forest Service office essentially and down over here more where the highway is today. That's all artificially been graded and so on. So more likely from that direction. But they left us very accurate maps and verbal descriptions which allow us to route their path, you know, pretty precisely. But if you had stepped out after they set up camp, you would have seen them right out here on the plateau that is now the city of Custer, between here and Laughing Water Creek, let's just say, or Lynn's Dakota Mart, you know, between here and there. So yeah, they were in our neighborhood for 2 days on this spot, and then 5 days east of Custer, about 3 miles. As many of you are fully aware, this is a picture of the campsite 3 miles east of town, which we have colorized just to kind of bring it to life here for the title page of the book. And again, this, similar to what I just showed you, this shows their whole trail. You're reading their own diaries and journals. You can navigate through the Black Hills and follow like literally to every campsite. A lot of the photo sites, we've got GPS data for these. A lot of them are on Forest Service or public land. So you can go to these, see the same burnt logs, you know, in both pictures, something that a lot of people have noticed in this photo. There's a lot more information about what's going on in those pictures. Same dead tree. This is on Calamity Peak, 3 miles east of town. One of the things the scans of the negatives brought us is we now see clouds in the picture, where in the past that was just white. It was so overexposed that you couldn't print it on photo paper and have it show up. But with digital, I'm able to manipulate that enough where we can pull that out, even though it's grossly overexposed by the photographer back in 1874. He was setting his exposure for the landscape in front of him. So yeah, same dead tree there. Same little live tree growing out of this rock up here. You know, all kinds of things like that we can pull out. Same tree here. This is looking over their campsite. You just see the wagons and tents. The same camp I showed you a moment ago from ground level. Yeah, and that's America Center Road there in the foreground. A couple of awesome photo sites there that you can get to. And then this is looking over the camp. And this is where we had the 150th anniversary of this expedition last summer that I know a number of you participated right in the pasture there in the foreground, thanks to John and Nancy Gossman allowing us to do that. So yeah, just east of Custer. So again, in the book, the new material includes this stuff. There's ruts we found that we didn't know about before that we think originate to this expedition, even though they were used by others. Mile north of town, off to the right, there's ruts paralleling the highway that, again, are right in line with the map that they left us in 1874. Graves and carvings and interesting spots around the hills that you can get to. Museums such as the 1881 Courthouse Museum, as well as others that have exhibits on the Custer expedition. And yeah, so that's probably enough of a plug on that, except that I am having a deal today where if you buy a hardcover, I will give you a free soft cover of the other book. So, and that one, I've got a real deal on that I'll tell you about at the end. But I do need to sell some books to cover some gas bills coming up this summer as I work towards another project. And then that, yes, please.
Well worth the price if you pay full price for both of them.
Aw, thanks. I'll pay you later. Thank you. The beer's on me later. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. we followed those books and with a book called The Black Hills Yesterday and Today, and then I promise I will get on with my program here. Just later photographs taken by other photographers who came to the Black Hills during the gold rush or after, and then I'm just doing the same thing, trying to figure out where they took a picture and matching that up. This is just north of Custer. That's obvious Black Elk Peak. Black Elk Peak again up there. Mount Rushmore being carved, Sylvan Lake, I'm sorry, that was Pactola, Sylvan Lake, the lodge that burned down. We're going to see more about that in about 5 minutes here. But so that's what's in that book, and I am having a little deal. And then I've done a book on Yellowstone and one on 24 national parks, which I spent 5 years on, and some of my best work there too. But so those are on the internet if you want to check those out. Well, finally, let's talk about some other pictures. My disclaimer here, I haven't had time to fully research everything I'm going to show you. This is a work in progress, something that I'm literally working on almost every day, and that we can make some conclusions just looking at the photos. And there's a couple of folks here I've spoken with beforehand, asking them very specific questions about some of what I'm going to show you, hoping we can fill in some gaps. But so here we are, this panoramic image up on Harney Peak, as it was once called, Black Elk Peak now. It's still officially called the Harney Peak Tower. They retained that name. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but generally we're calling it Black Elk Peak. This panoramic photo was taken around 1928, and they had these cameras that shot a piece of film this wide, and the camera would go like this, just like we saw. And now with digital, you can shoot a series of images and marry those together. This was not long after the mountain pine beetle epidemic. That's why there's all the dead trees. Those have mostly fallen over now. I actually shot this a few years ago. But Black Elk, the Lakota holy man, at least in one reference, he called it the Lodge of the Thunder God, which I think is an awesome name for that mountain, but it has been named in his honor now. And we can see in this photo of him from one of the books that have been published about Black Elk, that peak is, he was definitely right up there, of course, on Black Elk Peak when he was being interviewed by John Neihart for those books. So I kind of like that. But the history I can tell you a little more about is, again, the first white people we know of that climbed Black Elk, or Harney Peak as they called it, was the Custer expedition. So in 1874, on July 30-31, this is the town site of Custer, which would be founded a year later, and that's where they were camped at that time. And they took a little trip, Custer did, and Ludlow, his chief map maker, and a couple of detachments of soldiers, they headed for what they thought was Black Elk Peak, which they called Harney's Peak. They had a lot of trouble. They ended up here first, and all their diaries are full of this information. We went to the tallest peak, and we got up there, and went, whoops, there's another one that's a little higher, number 2. And then they got there and went, oh my God, there's Black Elk or Harney Peak off in the distance. And how many of you have maybe done that on Trail 9? How many people have actually been up on, I'm just curious, a good number of you. Yeah, right on. Okay, a lot of you have. So you'll recognize some of what I've got here. This is a sketch done on that expedition, on that brief. They were probably only up there an hour or so. They tried to climb the tallest peak as they saw it at the time. This sketch was done by the chief engineer, and you can kind of see what he's looking at here when you go up there. The trees have died now, and it's a little easier to see what he was looking at there, these peaks there. But that's not where the tower is, and that's kind of puzzling when we first looked at this and realized, well, Dr. Valentine McGillicuddy in 1875, this is a year later than Custer, the next year, there was another expedition in the Black Hills, the Newton-Jenny expedition. They were trying to figure out how much are the Black Hills worth, how much gold is really here. This was a beginning process of negotiating with the Lakota for acquiring the Black Hills. So McGillicuddy was tasked with surveying every watercourse in the Black Hills. He went up and down every watercourse, climbed Black Elk Peak, of course, with Tuttle and a couple of others. And they are the first people to actually ascend the top of what we would call, what they called the peak of Black Elk, or Harney Peak as they called it. And McGillicuddy is entombed. His ashes are in a little brass box that's embedded in the arm rail here of this staircase that goes up. If you haven't ever noticed that, watch for that next time you're up there. But he was put there in 1939, which is about when that tower was actually constructed. So he's over on this peak. That's a picture taken of him in 1875 doing his survey work from Black Elk Peak. And in a later article, he was adamant that that was the tallest peak of Black Elk Peak, Harney Peak, in 1875. The tower it's very close, but they've built that artificially. This would have been a little harder to use, I think, is what it boils down to. But it's been interesting to kind of put this together and realize he was down south of the tower that we look at today. And in this 1875 photo, you can see that matches up with the present day pretty well. The mountain pine beetle, killed these trees. That kind of opened that up for me a little bit. A lot of rock has disappeared from up here in the last 100 years. Maybe the CCCs, maybe just random tourists pushing them off. I've seen this in other places where rocks that are in an old picture are now missing. Edge of the Grand Canyon is a good example. You know exactly what happened. 10-year-old boy, big rock, let's go, off the edge. So, or even a 30-year-old boy. But anyway, yeah, that if you kind of glance at this, you can see there's a couple little peaks. And I've been up there, and it's very crumbly granite. It's kind of loose and a different type of granite than we see in some other places. So that's McGillicuddy. And then I don't have like every year documented here, but in 1897, the U.S. Geological Survey, I believe that was the year, did a survey of Harney Peak because they wanted to know what the elevation was. And so they did their work. I believe the number was 7242, or 7240. It depends on what you look at, but we see 7240 a lot. Then within a short time later, maybe 10 or 15 years later, they started realizing, hey, we could use this for fire lookout, this high point. So they, for just a while, just had a table up there with this table with a firefinder, a plain table with an Osborne firefinder on it. So you can, triangulate with another mountain that's looking at the same fire and put that on a map and start sending your troops in there to put the fire out. So that's what was there in 1911, at least. That's what this photo is dated in the Forest Service archives where I found it. And the latest technology, they were able to phone these in, and there's that table again. And he's on the summit of Harney Peak, smoking his pipe there and looking at the Osborne firefinder and calling in fires. And then this is the first tower that was built up there. And notice it's only got 3 windows. And I kind of wonder if it didn't just blow off of there. It looks a little bit shaky up there, and then down below the tower was a log cabin for a while, and I don't know if that came before the tower or what, but that's in the area that's now a dam. You'll sometimes see water in there, and they've dammed it, where they were collecting water at later times during the history of this fire tower. That's around 1920. They've got it roped in pretty good here, almost like a tent, but they got it tied down. But I don't think that lasted or was there very long. This is just showing how that's positioned with a modern view of what it looks like up there now, except I think these trees have probably died now. But and then in 1921, I think that's a pretty firm date. And again, I'm prepared to be stand corrected on any of this if somebody has more knowledge. But they built I call it the 5-window tower, the second tower. And this one appears in lots of pictures, from the 1920s and 1930s. And this is inside of that tower. And I am not positive, but I think this might be Rudy Anderson's grandfather. I don't know if anybody here happens to know, but he was in the fire lookout at that time, and he told me before he passed away years ago. He passed away recently, but years ago he told me about his grandfather working up there. So they've got the fire Osborne there, the thing again, and the phone, and this is another great shot of people working in there. I don't know who this is, but they've even got, it looks like souvenirs and gum and stuff for sale, decks of cards, so they're running a little gift shop up there. And there was quite an operation just before the summit. There was a cabin with all kinds of good, souvenirs and food and water and so on that I don't have pictures of. There's unfortunately any one of these pictures, I could stand here and ramble for an hour, and I'm not going to do that to you, but I know there's more out there. And so again, that's why I'm kind of just trying to get the conversation going. So who's coming to Black Elk Peak or Harney Peak? It's tourists, in some cases coming from Sylvan Lake, which is, roughly 3 miles away. Although at this time, I think they actually went via the cathedral spires and then up, which would have been a little longer, but they were often riding these burros, which are said to be the ancestors of the burros down in the park. And I don't know any reason why not to believe that. But so this is down at Sylvan. Any number of pictures you'll see of people walking or riding these burros in their finest Sunday attire, as people used to dress for going out in the woods. And and they're over by the cathedral spires in this picture, for example, but they're on their way on the trail, as it says, to Harney Peak. And then it got a little more modern, and I don't know exactly the dates on this. This ended, I'm guessing, in the 60s or 70s. If anybody knows, feel free to yell out, but I do hope to kind of reshoot this photo. I know where this is. It's up at, I think they call it Midway, you know, or that big plateau you first get to there. And you can see Harney Peak is just barely visible right there. So that's well down from the top. But yeah, you could ride a Jeep for a while. I've got a ticket for riding that Jeep, even I found on eBay. And then 1938, jumping back here, this is dated June 7th, 1938. These blueprints for what would become the tower that we are more familiar with today. This is a photo of it under construction that I got on eBay years ago. Recognize what that was. And the CCCs, of course, built that. They hauled rock all the way up from, you know, I guess French Creek or farther down, and built this tower. But that's the tower that McGillicuddy was on. And again, I kind of wonder if some of those rocks didn't find their way over to the tower. You know, it would have been a good source of that sort of material. I shot this from a helicopter, and it was about 2005, and the mountain pine beetle was just starting to come in. And I remember seeing this and going, boy, that's ugly, those red trees. I wonder what that is, you know. And little did I appreciate, you know, how that would become, if you've been here a few years, you know, quite an epidemic that killed, you know, millions and millions of trees. So we'll see some other examples of that. These are just a few beauty shots from my own experiences up there. I've stayed up there for thunderstorms a couple of times. You know, this is years ago now, but just kind of wondering what would happen and hoping I would, you know, get out of there and alive. But I was actually shooting out a window in the tower. It didn't have glass, and I could see right out the window and relatively safe under the rock structure there. But so yeah, in wintertime, same thing. It's just awesome up there in the winter. Sometime you're all by yourself, or maybe you are nowadays, I don't know, but this was a few years ago. So in 2016, I'd gotten to know these two guys, that's me on the left, and then Jerry Penry and Kurt Lubke, and they're surveyors, professional surveyors, have been doing this for decades, and they have a hobby or a skill of going and finding old surveys. They like to go middle of Nebraska or in the Black Hills. They surveyed the whole western line, you know, and they can literally figure out where the surveyor in 1885 put his post, and they're authorized to do this. They dig down, they find the marker or rock, or sometimes it was a tea kettle, believe it or not, or all kinds of things that the survey crews would use back then to, you know, this is the spot that I surveyed, and that's official information. And they got interested in what the elevation of Harney Peak really was. And Jerry found out that it hadn't been resurveyed since 1897, and he couldn't believe that. And so he said, well, we're gonna survey it again. And so they brought, you know, the latest equipment. They had base stations over by Hill City and one down here by Custer and then up on top. So I don't understand all this, but they're triangulating the satellites and let it sit for a couple days so it's gathering data, you know. And so that was really fun. And I've got a whole program on this, but you can also, I'll show a website in a minute here. So they're trying to figure out what the highest existing rock was or is. And so I was kind of helping them with that with old photos that I matched up with what's there now. So you can see, you know, the rock on the left is still there, but the tower has been built over the guy at the table that I showed you earlier. He's in the rock there somewhere, but they recognized that this line was pretty much straight on with that window. So they used that window. That's the one I shot the lightning out of, actually. They used that window as a reference for what the original height of Black Elk Peak or Harney Peak would have been. And in a nutshell, what they came up with is that they measured 13 feet too high back in 1897. But this, just Google the true elevation of Harney if you want to look this up, and you'll find that website that's listed here, and you can read more about that if you'd like to. But I was really tickled to be part of that. Well, we're going to move down to Sylvan Lake now and move on a little bit here. The history of these two places is really, I think, tied together. But this is a sign up at Sylvan Lake right now, and I'm not picking on the park or anything, but this is the wrong date on the sign. And well, I know for a fact it is, and otherwise I wouldn't say that. But it's out on the internet a lot as 1881, and there was no reason to put a lake there in 1881. And obviously we got sources that say it was built in actually 1891, and it's just a typo. But I think, I finally went and fixed Wikipedia. I've never done that before, but I got in as an editor and changed it to 1891 because I think that's where some of the website stuff was coming from, and maybe this sign as well. Just people seeing it. It must be true if it's on Wikipedia. So I don't know where that started, but this is from the Custer Chronicle, much more reliable maybe than Wikipedia, I don't know. And in 1892, as it says, Charles or Theodore Reeder put up a dam in Sunday Gulch and has made this shimmering body of water. They've put in a new road from Custer to the new lake, and they called it Custer Lake. I've also seen it called Harney Peaks Lake, and I think I've seen one other name too. But so this is 1892, and there's more to be done on this with newspapers.com. I'm sure there's lots of information there. And then in 1895, 8 men are working on finishing the 40-room hotel Theodore Reeder has built up at Sylvan Lake. So that's 3 years later. So it's definitely lake and then the hotel, if I can understand this. And I don't know if anybody else cares about any of this. I was just trying to get to the bottom of it. This is an article I found that said the hotel was under construction in 1891. Maybe that's correct, but there doesn't seem to be much of a lake. But I think the other thing that's going on at times is that this is 1891 as well, no lake. That the lake went up and down as he was fixing the dam, trying the dam. Maybe I can get a few more feet of elevation adding to the dam. And you kind of see that in some of these photos. So when you look at this photo of Sylvan Lake, you kind of go, well, what's wrong with this old photo? There's no hotel. The hotel would later appear, about right there. And so that proves to me the lake was there before the hotel. And these guys are sitting on the dam, which appears to be under construction as well in that time frame of about 1891. This is looking to the east, so the old hotel was right down behind those rocks. You would have maybe seen it, but I think it wasn't there yet because the lake is still filling with water. Do you kind of see that? I don't know if y'all can picture this, but from the west side of the lake again here, now the lake has filled up the pretty much the area that we expect today, but there's still some ground sticking out here and there's room for it to rise some more. That's looking down at the hotel, obviously under construction, so I'm guessing this fits that other headline around 1895. There's no pavilion yet in front of the hotel. That came a little bit later. Now we see the pavilion under construction. The lake is still, I would say, not full, but people are out using their boats and posing for photos like this so that I'll get to that in a second. And then again, the pavilion, dance pavilion, I sometimes hear that called, is under construction here as well, very clearly in this old photo. And I do collect these, I should say. I love these old photos, especially the really old ones where the pavilion is off to the left side, but you find them on the internet and so on, and in various archives where you can get a copy of them. But so this is a colorized postcard showing the pavilion. It's high out of the water. It's on the shore and pretty solid structure, but gradually you'll start to see that you can almost drive a boat in there, maybe you could at this stage, because the water level is coming up. And then the trains get involved. The train comes to Custer in 1891, and that's bringing in people to visit. Instead of looking for gold or building a ranch or whatever, they're coming here to see. This was called the beauty spot of the Black Hills, for a long time. There wasn't anything else like it, no Rushmore, no Jewel Cave, no, other attractions like that. So people are starting to take the train and come and visit, and we start to see more photos like this, kind of these beautiful idyllic landscape shots and drawing people out here for their honeymoons or vacation or whatever the case might be. Again, you can kind of see the water just come in because these branches and trees and bushes that were ground above water type plants now are going under the surface of the water there. Just a couple more shots here. The hotel. And then a little plug. This is from my book, The Black Hills Yesterday and Today. I did do a few photo pairs there where you can kind of see where the hotel used to be and how that looks today. The trains, again, you could go all the way from Chicago, all the way to Custer and then get up to Sylvan Lake. But you couldn't take the train to Sylvan Lake, so how'd you get there? You would be down in Custer, you get off the train, and looking down Main Street here, off in the distance, what's that say on that sign there? Headquarters for Sylvan Lake and Jewel Cave. So they're trying to, it doesn't look like they've drawn many crowds yet, but I'm sure they showed up once in a while, and then you could get on a tally-ho coach like this, or a stagecoach or something, and ride up to Sylvan Lake on that. And so somebody from the museum, do we still have this in the museum? Is that, Doc, do you know? Yeah, this is still in the museum, this very vehicle or one just like it. And apparently it might have been used, at least for this photo, to get people to Sylvan Lake. Everybody and their baby going to Sylvan Lake. So, then you would ride the mules up to Harney Peak and have a lovely vacation. Little kids and maybe their babysitter, matron, we don't know. And then by the 1920s, people are driving their cars right to Sylvan Lake, right? So there's quite a few photos where you can tell they really did draw a crowd up there of visitors from all over, and boating, and the pavilion now has moved to the right. And this is again, I don't know who cares, but I'm interested in when did that pavilion move? And I know it's out there. It's probably in a book by Jesse Sundstrom or somebody like that, and I just haven't looked it up. But at some point they moved it over to that side, and there's a story about it sinking through the ice partially or all the way and getting pulled up again. And so I'll try to run that down at some point, and I don't know if this will ever make it into a book or what, but I'm interested, at least, as you can probably tell. So, then the disaster in 1935. The fire burned the hotel. And this was in the Rapid City Journal probably 15 years ago, and I just took a picture of it, and I kind of wish I would have got a hold of this gentleman out of Box Elder, but that's a pretty good photo. But every time if I ever come across these, I collect them, and for reference. And so this is another shot of the hotel, and it looks like they rescued some furniture that would be amazing to see today somewhere. Apparently shortly after the fire, probably a day or so, somebody's already set up, business for whoever shows up to look at the fire. They're going to need a Coca-Cola or something. And then this is from the state park Facebook page. They posted a photo of the fire a while back. And then I've got one more here, I think, of just a picture postcard of the aftermath. So they didn't try to rebuild on the shoreline. I think that was problems even then, being that close to the water. But this other structure, I don't know that was there very long. I haven't seen very many pictures of it. I'm assuming it's just sort of a gift shop, boat rental. But the pavilion was still in place for at least a while later. And we also see these things. What's this? That's a toboggan run, which in the winter would run, down onto the lake. And this is a ski jump, which if you're following my Facebook page, I posted about. I'll show it here in a minute. But this is the toboggan run down to the lake. Lots of fun in the wintertime. So there was a winter festival in the mid 1920s till 1935, I think, is the last year, but it could have gone on after that. They had trouble with snow not always being reliable, as we know here in this area. But this is the ski run, which is across the highway, kind of to the west of Sylvan Lake. And here's a photo of what that looked like from the top. And if you read the newspapers, they had Olympic skiers and people doing demonstrations, professional skiers bringing that in. Black Elk Peak off in the distance there. Sylvan Lake is right here at the base of these rocks. You can't really see the water from this position, but here's what that looks like, or last winter it looked like. And you can still kind of see where the ski run was, although the trees are kind of starting to fill that in now a little bit. But maybe we could bring that back sometime here. That'd be awesome at Custer. We could do burning beetle and a ski jump. But and then just a couple shots of the winter festival and different angles that I've replicated. And these are not in any book yet, but hopefully we'll be going into a future book that I'll get to in a second. This is from the Black Hills Yesterday and Today, the book over there that I shot a few years ago. Again, just kind of showing the layout at sunrise of the lake up there. Well, we'll cruise on down to Custer now, down to the city of Custer City, old-time Custer, and I've got about probably a couple hundred pictures of town, and there's many more in the museum. I find these in other places, and I'm always watching for them, especially the really early stuff. Again, if anybody, you stumble on something that looks like if you don't see the train in the picture, it's before 1891, and that's really hard to find those kind of pictures. So this one, I believe this is pre-1890, because I don't think the train is in this photo, but the courthouse, or now the Courthouse Museum, which we very smartly preserved in the 1970s and made into a museum, is kind of the reference point I'm always looking at. If you can see what angle that is, if it's straight on, the photo was taken from Big Rock Park. If it's off to the left, it was taken from the Custer Star rock. Generally speaking, that's how that worked. But so we can kind of cruise along Main Street here. I'll see if I can keep up. That's the movie theater, Opera House. There's the candy store now. I don't know what those are offhand right now. This is the block with various shops in it. There's Carson Drug. Where are we? I'm getting lost. I'm too close. Pizza Hut. I still call it Flora's Gifts. That's not Flora's anymore. The Kleeman House Hotel is still there. And the, it's a bed and breakfast now. The Booth, it used to be called the Booth Hotel, and it was wooden, and then they built a brick structure, which is still there. So Delmer Brown, who I know many of you recall, passed away a few years ago and left a legacy for the museum in his will, and there's a library named after him. And he and I didn't spend enough time with him, but he chatted with me a little bit about this notion of trying to identify buildings and kind of what's their history on any one spot, how many businesses have been there. And just in the last 20 years, it's hard to keep up. And this spring, as was alluded to, I think, when Brock spoke, there are like 5 restaurants doing kind of a musical chairs around Custer, moving from one spot to another, other businesses. So this goes on all the time, and trying to sort all that out from the early days, though, I think would be fascinating. That is the first picture ever taken on the town site of Custer, I finally realized, from the Custer expedition, a bunch of guys having a champagne supper during the Custer expedition. And this is in our new book, the new edition of Exploring with Custer, and it's right along the Mickelson Trail near Search and Rescue headquarters, near where the old hospital was, if you're familiar with that part of town. At least that's where I think it is. I think this looks like the spot. I'm not totally convinced, but I keep throwing it out there, and nobody has come up with anything else yet. But I believe this is actually the first photo taken on the town site. Unfortunately, the photographer did not take any other photos of this campsite. So we don't know, except what you see in the background there. He may have been inebriated and unable to do so, I don't know. But he was a very skilled photographer, but he took the rest of that day off for some reason. And then in 1875, again, the next year, the Newton-Jenny expedition, there was a photographer named Guérin, kind of a French name. And it's like he shot these pictures and then they hardly made any copies. So these are even more rare than the photos from 1874 expedition. And so there's a few of them over in Mitchell at Dakota Wesleyan. They've got a few prints up in Pierre at the State Archives. But I was just looking at these. This is going on 20 years ago now for the Black Hills Yesterday and Today book, and realized these rocks behind, that's the Super 8 over there on the left. There's now another hotel here, the Comfort Inn, or I forget, which, you really can't see this unless you walk there back behind it. But there's French Creek, and I think it's kind of appropriate. The first photo is, a bunch of guys mining, for gold. They got a sluice running there in 1875 in the town of Custer. But again, he didn't shoot any photos of whatever existed of the town itself, as far as we know. But by 1876, a year more goes by, and there are several photographers that come into the Black Hills this year. So we've got multiple photographers, and typically, a lot of times they're coming from Cheyenne, they come up to Custer, they take a few pictures, they move on to Hill City, they go up to Deadwood. So there may be a series of photos by any given photographer kind of along that route. And this one is dated right on the back, April 5th, 1876, and we've got some captioning here, which is always helpful. Hill City Road in the distance. We know it's April because there's snow on the ground, right? That's Custer for you. It's spring, but it's snowing. But that's really helpful. And I have one more with this same color mount coming up here that probably by the same photographer. And so I just, I go out and I kind of eyeball these. I'm trying to, I wonder if this is going to work, or there are trees in the way or whatever. So you can see where this is, Lynn's Dakota Mart, and up on the hill there. And there's a little house here, and I knocked on the door, nobody was home. I just haven't gotten back to this, but I do intend to go back and see. I think those are the same rocks. I mean, they sure look like it. And so I'll try to do a shot there at some point, hopefully on April 5th. That's my goal. I put it on the calendar and everything. But, and then another 1876, this is more over by Steel Collision, you might say, looking across the valley there. And then 1876, a little later, Bear Rock, or which is just west of downtown. This is right on the highway, you can see it from the road, and the Historical Society has a marker there as well. You can read up on, there's a couple of Airbnbs there now, big surprise, but the people are really nice and they let us refurbish that sign recently. There were other troopers in the Black Hills in 1876. This is General Crook's expedition, and this is behind vector printing. That was the path that they used a lot back then, down over the hill, not across the top. You see pictures taken of that all the time, looking into town. And then this is right downtown somewhere, and again, digging back into other pictures, we might be able to figure out where these buildings are. I don't know exactly where this is, but that is General Crook, and they they named this restaurant The Crook. It's like, that's not a bad name, for considering kind of what happened. But anyway, that's kind of fun. And then a much later shot, maybe along that stretch, I don't know. But there's the Kleeman House. Again, always kind of looking for that. It's got the balcony on it. That came a little later, not earlier. Flora's Gifts. Somebody help me out. What's that called now? Anybody know? Flora's? Okay, well, it's Flora's. And then there's the museum, the courthouse, right there. So all of those landmarks with all these wooden buildings helps you identify where you are. And notice this says Chronicle Office, so that's the Custer Chronicle. And J.A. Dixon, photographer, landscape, what's that say, photographer studio, something like that. Those buildings are long gone because they're made out of wood. So this is about where the post office is now. But again, that idea of kind of mapping this out fascinates me a little bit. And so I did do this shot here, and you can kind of take this in, 1876, Laughing Water Creek, Crook Street. I'm gauging where Main Street is, and that they are in roughly the same position, I think. It's tricky with trees on the ground, level blocking things, but same hill shapes here. And even these two mountains, and I should know what those are called out southwest of town, they are visible on the original of this. I don't think you can pick them out there, but it's looking the right way. But this has all been massively excavated. When they built the hospital, they leveled it again, and before that it was a quarry. So the land level has literally, come down maybe 20, 30 feet or maybe more, I'm not really sure. And obviously when they build apartments, they always kind of level things off, or fill, as the case may be. So things do change a lot, but that's what I'm trying to kind of document a little bit, I guess. Let's see, and then this one just kind of overlays on the next shot here. Different photo, but same area, but a little harder to read that one. So this is from the Star, Custer Star Rock, I'll call it that area, 1880s. And again, notice now we're seeing the side of the museum. So we're off to one side. Before they put the wings on the courthouse, which I don't know when they were added, but again, that sort of thing, knowing when those were added, knowing when the school was built, knowing when that school was torn down. And some of you, Kenny, you probably know all this stuff forward and backwards. I just haven't sorted it out yet. But those would help us start to date these very precisely, and it's a project I hope to get into eventually. Kleeman House way down here, Flora's right there again, and then these buildings change quite a bit. And then we go to the 1900 from almost the same angle, different photographer. What's different? Well, we got a train there now, so that came in 10 years earlier or 8 years earlier, and the buildings have developed. There's more houses, the school's still there. And then we go to 1940s, that school's gone. They built another one right there. That's the old high school where the armory is now. You can see more businesses that you might recognize today, or buildings that you recognize today. Basically the same buildings with a few exceptions. The wooden structures don't seem to survive in wood, but I think a lot of times they got laminated over with other materials or bricks or whatever. They're still the same shape and size, but a little different. I'll just point out one here. That would be, I think this is where the begging burrow is now. I forget this one or this one. We'll see a photo taken from there in just a little bit that I'll share. And then this is 2009. That's the most recent time I was up there taking photos like this. So that's out of date, of course, because there's now a second floor on the courthouse, I think. That's changed a lot. A lot of other, this is gone. The tramway, we used to call that, and that was the sheriff's office, and that's all gone. Veterans Park there now. So a lot of changes, and I should go back and do another version of that. Yeah, I got about 15 more minutes. Oh, I'm going faster than I thought. Is that clock right? Okay. Well, I will say again, if anybody needs to get up, and you won't offend me, I know this is going on here a little bit, but I'm going to just kind of shift, and I'll come back to Custer in this program, but this is what I'm working on right now. They might actually turn a dime eventually, I'll put it that way, because I'm going to publish a book, hopefully in a year or so if we can get this done, unlike what I was just kind of talking about for fun there. But been kind of working on this South Dakota yesterday and today for about 10 years, and I'm trying to do, roughly 300 sites across the whole state. I've got about 2,000 old photos that I've gotten. I'll show you the list next coming up here. And that'll include mostly their overviews. And I'm not looking for a shot of a little building on Main Street. I want the big broad views, kind of like we've been looking at. And landmarks, Missouri River, other places. And we do hope to publish that maybe a year from this summer, 18 months or so from now. We'll see if that is feasible. So I get, people ask, where do you get the historic photos from? And this particular project, Robert Colby or Bob Colby from Sioux Falls has been collecting photos of Dakota Territory and of the Black Hills for over 40 years. He has the most complete collection of photos of the Black Hills in 1876 of anybody, walking around, including a lot of museums. And he's been very kind on letting me access that, as well as postcards taken in numerous small towns. But all these other sources over 20-year period, I've looked at them and said, oh, this would work great, this would be nice, and I make copies or take a screenshot or whatever, and then with their permission we'll use these in the book, but I'm just using them as reference material right now, of course. That includes the 1881 Courthouse Museum. I do shop on eBay pretty regularly. I have a couple of searches set up, and I'm just going to say I like collecting early Custer City, and I like Sylvan Lake really early on, and Black Elk Peak, and a few other things. But if any of you, I mean this in all seriousness, are going to start buying that stuff, and you're bidding on something and somebody's bidding against you, call me and I'll be glad to take I just want a copy of the picture. So if I'm competing with anybody, it'd be silly to bid each other up. I'm hoping most of what I have will eventually end up in the museum down the street. I'm going to put it that way in a few years. So they will go to the right place, I think, and I encourage any of you with those kind of old photos, think about donating to the museum or at least letting them be scanned so they're preserved and your copy disappears into family history eventually, but the scans are still on somebody's computer. That's my little pitch there for preservation. But so anyway, yeah, a lot of photo sources. Much of this is preliminary. It's just a glimpse of what I hope to get done, but I have had some pretty good luck. This is Rapid City in 1876, pretty early photo. And a lot of times these 1876 photos are hard to do this way because things have changed so much. But this one, fortunately, is high enough that, you're seeing over the trees. If the photo had been taken right here, you just see a wall of trees or the first house. And that's what I run into a lot. I'm down on ground level. I can't see anything now because of what has changed in the town or city. Dinosaur Hill, and this is an amateur photo. And amateur photos, I emphasize this, are sometimes way more interesting than the professional ones because the pro wouldn't shoot this. It's under construction. Wait till it gets done, then sell postcards of the completed project, right? And I love that because they're actually constructing the dinosaurs on Dinosaur Hill, and that'll work out great. And our friends Matt and Tanya Friedel, as you may know, have a landscape design firm, and they've been running this whole project and really done a nice job with it. So when that greens up a little bit in the spring, I'll go back and shoot that one again for this project, I think. I've worked with a guy up in Rapid. We got met over Facebook, Vietnam era helicopter pilot who flew the Rapid City flood in 1972. Yeah, it's a terrible part of history, but we want to remember, that any of our valleys can flood. We had a flood here in Custer in 2019 that surprised the heck out of everybody, including, me, search and rescue. We're down here blocking the highway because there's water over the road this deep and people are driving in. It's a sunny day. What's all this water? Well, there was a thunderstorm way up in the hills somewhere that was dropping water and then it all ran down. And that's not unlike what happened in Rapid City. So he's got these photos he shot shortly after the flood. Some of them aerial, well, they're all aerials actually. And I've got some that are ground level as well. But this is the area of Founders Park today. So I've looked at it in Google Earth and that's what's there today. And I hope to fly a drone into that position and do another shot, that matches the other one. So yeah, I've got my drone license and FAA and all that. We follow all the rules, but it might be possible to do that one. And this down in Hot Springs, the first picture, maybe first house in Hot Springs, it's titled on the back. Maybe the first picture of Hot Springs in an area that we probably recognize from driving through there. A lot of changes there in Hot Springs. And Cheyenne Falls, anybody been to Cheyenne Falls? It's a trick question. Because I think this is at flood stage, but that's along the Cheyenne River. Where was that anyway? Well, it's under Angostura Lake is where that waterfall was, and I didn't know that. I found this picture, I'm like, I wonder where that was, and did some other research and found out that it was flooded by Angostura when they built the dam down that way, a half a mile or so. And I flew that with a drone also just to get out over the water. But Hill City, postcard, more recent photos, I'll call this more recent because it's probably the 1940s, are a little bit easier to replicate because a lot of things tend to survive into the present day. So this was the main highway into town. I can remember that, but then they put the bypass in, which lets you avoid going down Main Street, and fortunately did not totally kill off the town like it did in some places around the state. And then this is back in Custer. There's our old friend Flores and the Kleeman house there. And so that, that's what I need to lock in on this wonderful shot of these, oxen pulling their wagons. And before the train was here, obviously, because if the train had been in Custer already, they wouldn't have been hauling freight with wagons, right, as a rule. Yeah, that one matches up pretty well. I mean, those line up real well. And this is right where that guy was standing back in probably 1885 or something. And then from the Kleeman house, this picture was taken from the Kleeman house as it stood back in 1900. This photo is dated on the back, July 4th, 1900. So last July 4th, I got permission from the Kleeman house and went up on their patio. They were very kind to let me do that on the deck there and did a couple shots of the parade going by there at the same event, the July 4th parade here in Custer. And then the same thing here, found this picture in the School of Mines archives. It's the 1924 Gold Discovery Days parade, which was the second year we had Gold Discovery Days, and I'm not sure there was a parade in 1923. I hope to find out, but anyway, this could be the first parade. And the main float is Homestake Mine there. They've got a big display showing how much gold they had taken out by 1924, millions of dollars. I can't quite read that from here, but lots of stuff going on in Custer. Maybe you recognize some of these buildings. This is Calamity Jane's and the Gold Pan now, I believe, which we will soon find out from the roof of the Begging Burro. This one best float in the parade that year, and in their category, and it's the Black Hills Clean Water Alliance float. Does anybody get the irony of this? It literally says no mining on the side there. And I support them, full disclosure. I mean, I think we need some regulation on mining. I don't know who doesn't think we need that. But I just thought it was ironic to go from Homestake to this in 100 years. But so this is exactly 100 years between those two photos. Obviously, we're drawing some bigger crowds for Gold Discovery Days now. And then up in the Needles here, Custer State Park, 1920s. This is the aftermath of a mountain pine beetle epidemic that took place before 1920. This is what it looked like the first time I went there in 2005. Again, the beetles are just coming in and causing the needles to turn to red in the pine trees. And I went back again then in 2019, and all those trees were gone. Some of them have been logged and dragged out, but mostly they just died. The spruce are the ones that survive because they're not susceptible to the mountain pine beetle. They have their own insect predators that weren't working on them at this point in time. So that has been kind of a interesting, I'll call it a privilege to get to see that progression, I've managed to live long enough to watch that. And I wish I would have taken more photos there over time, but we do have those at least. And then I think we maybe had a glimpse of this one earlier, but Jim Laverick, if you know Buzz, they're posing for me again in 2006, beginning of the mountain pine beetle. And then we went back in 2022, and again, you can see how the forest has been naturally thinned by the mountain pine beetle. And I'm here to say, in my opinion, this saved us maybe from some big fires, I don't know, but it certainly thinned out the forest, and most of what's left, a lot of these are spruce trees, and there's also aspen coming in. So we're just kind of starting that process of regeneration again. Just north of Custer, along the route of the Burlington train there. That is now, of course, the Mickelson Trail, and beautiful spot. I think this is the prettiest section along the bike trail today. And then down by kind of halfway to Edgemont, they say you used to have to, I mean, people wanted to get off the train instead of riding across the trestle on the train because it would shake. And I wish we had some video of that. But, and so they eventually filled that all in. It's kind of hard to believe, but this is right on the Mickelson Trail, of course. There is the trestle being filled in. There's this great photo from the library down in Edgemont that I, was hanging on the wall, and I just snapped a picture, but they're dumping the dirt there to gradually fill all that in. So all those beams are still under there somewhere. And then just one more shot up by Mystic of one of the tunnels that I found last year. And of course, Mount Rushmore will be in the book. I worked on this site for our Black Hills yesterday and today. A few of the photos in that earlier book I will put in the new book because I wanted to go back, see how things had changed again or whatever. So we're definitely using that. This is my wife and daughter. I actually have a picture like this from 2004 I should have put in the program, where my daughter is about this tall and my wife is, walking her. We're all a little taller and bigger now. But and then Jefferson on the wrong side here. He got, that wasn't working. There was bad rock there or something. They blasted that off and carved him on the other side. That's the other thing. That's 1932 in that photo. But and I do hope to include Crazy Horse Memorial. I haven't spoken to anybody up there. I've done work up there in the past and pretty good relationship, and I hope this will pan out. But this is obviously pretty early photo of the carving. And as you probably know, if you live here, it's made amazing progress in the last 3-4 years, especially. This is in 1992. I was a freelance photographer shooting film. Came out to the Black Hills I lived in Michigan at the time. I'm from eastern South Dakota, but we were living in Michigan where my wife was working, teaching, and I would come out and once in a while shoot one of these blasts, which I didn't appreciate at the time that would ever not be a thing, but here it is, part of history, so I do intend to go reshoot this one. I just haven't had a time to do it. But as you may know, they've got the hand done and the face is long done. Lots of stuff going on out there now, so I think that'll be interesting to see. As you go across the state, I'm looking for landscape views. They're hard to find. They didn't shoot a lot of postcards of just the landscape, but road to the Rosebud Bridge. The bridge was down here. You could go across the Missouri River near Bone Steel, South Dakota, maybe 8 miles out of town here. But it took a long time I spent about a day looking for this. Finally got permission from the landowner where I thought it was. And the eastern cedar are really changing the landscape, not just here, but other places across the state. This is north of Chamberlain. So there's Chamberlain. And again, the one hour lecture going down to hopefully 20 seconds, but these bridge spans came from that other bridge, like way over here, the Rosebud Bridge. They brought them up the Missouri River and put them at Chamberlain later, and then they moved them again after the dam was built. So they built the dam, that flooded this area that you can see now. They moved the bridge spans, they built a different railroad bridge, they put in Interstate 90, and the trees were growing that whole time. And to me, this is a little bit alarming. There is a movement with cattle producers to start to control this because it's reducing the amount of grazing available. It's cutting down all the grass that grows normally. You can hardly walk through there. It's very much a thicket, but I do think that's kind of a really interesting change. And then if you do follow my Facebook page, I put this up asking if anybody might know where this is. And I also showed this picture, but I had cropped off the bottom where it says going into Chamberlain, South Dakota. So that's where the Highway 16 was at one time. And I don't have this ready for presentation. I took this photo by chance. I saw the sunflowers, and then I found this photo on eBay, and this is really close to the other spot. I'm really close, but I'll go back and try to match it up a little better. And then this is if you turn around, you're looking towards Chamberlain, and I don't have a matching photo of this either, but this is all gone. It's very slumpy. It's that pure shale, that material that slumps and sinks, kind of like the Badlands. So that's just a field now, and you can hardly tell there was even a highway there anymore, but I'll be working on that. And then I don't know if you've ever shopped in Harding, South Dakota's business block, but this is up in northwestern South Dakota, a place that maybe somebody had big dreams and was hoping this would turn into something. And I I found that postcard on eBay, and I'd driven by this while working on the Custer expedition. Custer expedition went right through this valley within view of this picture, and I knew those buildings were there. And then when I saw the old photo, I went, that one I will pay, $20 for, or whatever it was, because I knew it would be such a interesting comparison. This is on a little ranch. The road goes right through the ranch, and the guy that owns it is super nice and very interested in history and so on. And then Wall, South Dakota, Wall Drug. These are 1940s cars, so that's approximately the time frame. There's this house down here. Again, this is the drone. There's a airplane shot this, they're flying out of the airport in Wall, which is, off this way. And I tried the drone about 3 times, finally got, close enough, not too high, not too low, and got a pretty good match. There you can see the Badlands off in the distance there. So the drone is sometimes useful. Philip, South Dakota, typical of what I'm trying to do, an overview shot, somebody doing something hopefully interesting, hauling lumber, or as the case may be, hauling grain now. So trying to kind of tie those things together if there's a way to do that. Sioux Falls, the arrow is pointing at something I'll talk about momentarily, and then the waterfall there that's now such an attraction in Falls Park in downtown Sioux Falls there. That mill burned down in 1956, but in about 1910, somebody took a picture from that window that the arrow was pointing at. And so again, that's gone. How do you get there? You fly your drone up there, and this is right under the flight path of the Sioux Falls Airport, so it's a little, there's helicopters going over and stuff. And the FAA controls that airspace, so just not to get technical, they allow you to fly a certain altitude, 100 feet in this case, no more than 100 feet high, but that was high enough to replicate that photo under the law there. So Campanile at South Dakota State College, as it was called then, photo taken out one of the windows of this tower that's on the campus of SDSU now, if you're familiar with that. And 1930s, I think that is, or early 1940s. And they mounted a webcam in the same window. So this is off the webcam. I just took a screenshot and it matched right up. That was like the easiest one I've ever done. But I do hope to go back there and shoot my own picture at some point. But at least I know where this is. I know how to get there if they'll let me in there and open the window and so on. That's where you get into permissions. But and then downtown Yankton, typical town that I'm trying to rephotograph, show what survived, what's different, and a lot of buildings survive there, and that's always nice to see. You like to see these old buildings. But on Facebook, you'll see people, why did they tear down that building? It's because nobody wanted to give somebody $5 million to fix it up. It's just it's a matter of economics. You can't repair every building, but it is nice to see when that does happen. All over. So this is Google Earth, and people ask, how do you do this? And this is basically it in a nutshell. These are the places around South Dakota I hope to visit, some of which I already have visited, not all of them, but this summer and spring, summer, and fall. And so you know what Street View is in Google Earth? You can fly down and look at the street. That's what this is. This Belvedere, South Dakota on Street View, right? So I've got an old photo of Belvedere. I fly to Belvedere, look at it, and say, well, by golly, I think I recognize a couple of those buildings. Maybe this will work out. So then I put a pin in, and that can transfer over to my GPS on my phone. And then when I'm out driving around, I'm not spending a lot of time just wondering, when I get off the freeway, will I see this? I already know it's there, and then I've already been to Belvedere and done my shot and try to match that up. So that's the 20-second version, like I say, of how this happens. But yeah, there we go. Belvedere, and like a lot of towns, it got bypassed by the interstate, which is out here. And you kind of see what happens to the town when the freeway came through is one cause of why it might have declined. But there's also places that are developed, and I guess it does say Deadwood on there. This is a toll booth up in Deadwood in the 1880s, I believe, or early 1890s, and they were charging a toll because whoever had the toll booth had built that section of road. And so I kind of came up with this technique of erasing the past in some way to show what's there now, which of course is a couple of big casinos or gambling halls. But sometimes on Facebook, again, people say, I wish it looked like it, we want to roll that back, and we probably would rather see what was there a long time ago a little more than what's there now. But no, and I'm not picking on Deadwood. They found a way to make their town really fly, and they do give money to places like the museum here. They helped fund our thing last summer with the 1874 Custer expeditions. So, all right, well, that is hopefully coming in a year. I can't swear to that. That's why it says probably. Please, follow my Facebook page or send me an email or whatever it takes if you're interested in following along on that. And I'll try to keep, posting. I did put up a page of these photos on my website. I don't have the link here, but if you go to my website, you can kind of see what I've done so far, and we'll be gradually adding to that over time. And then I've joined Blue Sky as well. It's another social media platform I'm using to some degree. So just a little bit about what I've got going over here as a special. We did a hardcover signed and numbered edition of 1,000 copies. And that means that my wife, Camille, numbered each one of them individually in her artistic hand. And then Ernie Graffey, my co-author, signed each one of 1,000 copies. And then I signed 1,000 copies, and we put them back in the boxes and took a little break. But, these were $99 when it first came out a couple of years ago. Time goes by. We need to get some space in the warehouse. So today they're $49, which is the same price as the soft cover would be. I don't have the soft covers because the hardcover is $49. Plus I'm going to throw in a free copy of Crossing the Plains with Custer. It's really if you want the books, it's a heck of a deal. On my website or Amazon or anywhere else, it'll be at least twice as much. And I'm going to even go so far as to say, if you bought a hardcover and you don't have this book, come over and see me. If you paid full retail, I'll make you a deal, believe me. And then the Black Hills yesterday and today, we've taken off $15 there. So that's only today. I think we need to close the doors at 4. We'll try to honor that on behalf of the library. I really do appreciate your attention, your interest. I hope this wasn't too much rambling. Speaking of a then and now, Finney, no, don't shoot this one. No pictures. The hair. Well, that's 1978. I was a photographer on a weekly paper in Brandon, South Dakota at that time, and slinging my Nikons with their Tri-X film, But I never dreamed I'd still be standing here 20 years, 50 years later talking about this stuff. But, well, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.